As midterms near, Democrats in Congress are preparing for battle when it comes to immigration. We caught up with Congressman Joe Kennedy to talk about the party's message moving forward. Recently, 3 House Democrats proposed a bill to eventually end ICE. Is that something that you are on board with?
Look, I think we absolutely, I share their concerns about ICE's operations and the mission and how they're going about part of their business. And I think it absolutely has to be looked at, has to be examined, and needs to be modified, period. We also have to ensure that there is some federal entity that is in charge of enforcing federal immigration law. I was a former prosecutor. One of the big issues, even in communities back in Massachusetts, was trying to make sure that when it came to immigration enforcement, that it was not going to fall on the shoulders of local police. I was a domestic violence prosecutor. Those cases are some of the hardest ones to try and to be able to prove, largely because of the power dynamic and the challenge that we have in providing victims the security, the comfort, the confidence to be able to come forward and testify against their accuser, which they need to do. If you have a victim that is here without the proper documentation, and the idea that she's going to come forward and potentially then be subject to deportation because as you're reporting that crime, you have your local law enforcement that now is charged with enforcing federal immigration policy, that is a disaster. And we should never fall into a position where that federal law is going to impact the local implementation of our state laws. And so I think we have to be very careful to make sure that, again, I have major issues with the way that ICE has been used underneath this administration. But we need to be thoughtful, I think, about what comes next underneath it, because you don't want to be put in a circumstance where essentially this falls to local law enforcement to do it. I think you'd be causing far more damage to the fabric of our community than even where we are now. But the way it's working isn't.
Okay, so maybe some reforms, but
Yes,
you don't want to see it
absolutely.
abolished in a year.
And if it is abolished, fine, something else has to come in to do it. Because again, this burden cannot, it can't go into local law enforcement. That's not their job, that's not their role, that's not the task that they've asked for. And if we're serious about protecting our communities, that needs to be a different entity.
Well, we've seen immigration debated pretty frequently as of late for a number of reasons. And we hear Republicans say a lot, oh, Democrats just want open borders.
Nope.
So that's not something you support either.
No, look, every country has the right, responsibility, obligation to enforce its immigration policy. And we should have an immigration policy, absolutely. And I support that. What I think our Republican colleagues are being a bit disingenuous about this. Back up a bit. 2013, under an Obama administration, the U.S. Senate came together, a bipartisan group, and had nearly 70 votes on a bipartisan immigration bill. Veto-proof majority. Speaker Boehner wouldn't give us a vote on it in the House. We did a whip count. We had the votes to pass it. We couldn't even get it on the floor. We have the votes to pass DACA today. Speaker Ryan knows it. They just went through a whole wide variety of charades, essentially, to block that vote because they knew that if it actually came to the floor, it would pass. Immigration policy is an extremely divisive one, no doubt. Congress actually has a consensus as to the way to move forward on some big pieces to it, if not comprehensive reform. Republicans won't even give us a chance to vote on it, not a single hearing on those bills. And so their critique about this, I think, is it's a head in the sand way of trying to pass the buck off to Democratic Party, who, by the way, as long as I've been in the House, has not been in the majority. We can't force a debate on a bill. We can't call up a bill. That is their right as a majority. But to then try to blame us for them not being able to pass a bill when we're locked out of a room, the last version of this, they literally tried to negotiate in a Republican caucus meeting where the doors are shut and we're not allowed in the room. And it's our fault it didn't pass? Give me a break.
Well, immigration was recently polled as one of the top 2 issues that voters care about heading into the midterms. And midterms are months away. A lot can change in that time. But what do you think the Democratic Party's message should be on immigration ahead of the midterms? What should it look like?
So I think there's a couple components to this, right? One is there's over 6 million unfulfilled jobs in this country, right? This is a huge economic issue where we've got to focus some of that to fill that gap on retraining and skills domestically, no doubt. But there's no question at all that some of those jobs need to be filled by high-skilled immigrant labor that can come in and actually make a contribution to our society today, can help spur economic growth today, can help create more jobs today. So that's got to be a big piece to it, too. You got to secure the border. We have to make sure that we have an idea of who's coming, who's leaving, and that that process is a reflection of the values and policies that we want to put forth in our country. That's fine. We should do that. 3, for the 10 to 12 million people that are here without proper documentation, we have to recognize the fact that almost every single iteration of deportation, Republicans have tried or talked about, and it doesn't work. Self-deportation, Mitt Romney ran on that policy. It doesn't work. The idea that America is going to create 2 classes of citizens, some that are in the shadows and some that are not, that doesn't work. There are ways that I think we can make sure that people can come out of the shadows. They go to the back of the line. They earn a way to citizenship, that we should be able to put in place the safeguards and policies to make sure that we are able to do that, and I think do that fairly and equitably. 4, the immigration laws in this country are about as incomprehensible and as complex as it gets. The reason why we are having challenges with immigration in our country is because the existing system itself does not work. It hasn't been updated in 30 years. Make it work better. And if it does work better, if we are able to actually fill some of these holes, update that system, you're gonna have a reality where which is going to decrease the tendency to see individuals have to feel like their only choice is to come across the border illegally, rather than try to go through a system that is in fact fair.